The mornings in Seabrook always smelled like salt and coffee, the kind of stillness that made you hear your own thoughts too clearly. I'd moved here 3 months ago, just a rented room above the Harbor Cafe, a few boxes, and a head too full of reasons to leave everything behind. Every morning at 8:47, I'd see her. Claire. She lived across the narrow lane that faced the water, white cottage, blue shutters, and an overgrown garden that looked like it belonged to someone who'd stopped caring about perfection a long time ago. She was always outside around that time, watering her plants, hair pulled up loosely, dressed in soft cotton that matched the morning light. She must have been in her early 40s. I never asked, never needed to. You could tell she'd lived, like the ocean had touched her once and never really left. Our first words weren't anything special. "Morning," she said once, not even looking up from the roses. "Morning," I answered, too quickly, spilling half my coffee down my wrist. She smiled. Barely, just a small curve that vanished before I could be sure it was real. The next few weeks, it became a rhythm. I'd sit on my small balcony pretending to read, and she'd appear with her watering can, humming faintly to herself. Sometimes, we exchanged simple words: weather, sea tides, the noisy seagulls that stole bread from the cafe tables. But there was something underneath all of it, something quiet. One afternoon, the rain came suddenly. The kind that doesn't warn you, it just arrives. I ran to grab the laundry I'd hung out back, but the wind had already tossed a few shirts into her yard. When I went to retrieve them, she opened the door, holding one of them carefully like it was made of glass. "You should have used more pins," she said softly, her eyes glinting like the gray sky behind her. "Guess I didn't expect the weather to turn so fast," I said, embarrassed by how close we suddenly were, just the scent of rain and her lavender soap between us. "Seabrook never asks permission," she said. "The sea changes its mind every hour." Her voice stayed with me long after she handed the shirt back. After that day, she started leaving her gate slightly open whenever she saw me walking back from the harbor. "Come in for tea," she'd say, almost offhandedly, like it didn't matter whether I did or not. The first time I said yes, her house smelled like cinnamon and something faintly burnt. She laughed when I noticed. "Still can't bake properly," she admitted, scraping the edges of a pie. "I keep hoping practice will make me less hopeless." "You're already better than me," I said. "My oven's been storage for books since I moved in." She laughed again, this time for real, and for a moment it felt like the house exhaled. I learned small things about her, piece by piece. She taught art at a nearby community center, lived alone, had a grown daughter studying in the city, used to be married once, though she didn't say much beyond that. There was a ring mark on her finger that time hadn't yet convinced to fade. And me, I told her I was 24, still figuring things out. She smiled, not mockingly, but in a way that said she remembered what that age felt like. Sometimes, she'd pause while speaking, eyes drifting toward the sea as if she'd lost her place in the sentence. Those silences felt heavier than words. I started noticing the details I shouldn't have. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when thinking. The small scar near her wrist. The soft hum she made when she poured tea. Every evening, I told myself it was nothing. She was just a neighbor. A kind woman in a quiet town. But every morning, 8:47 came again, and I'd find myself waiting, just to see the curtain of her window shift, or the faint sound of her humming through the open gate. One evening, when I walked past her house, her light was off. No sound, no shadow moving behind the glass. I stopped without meaning to, staring at the dark windows, feeling something strange in my chest. A small, sharp emptiness. I almost knocked. Almost. But I didn't. Instead, I walked home, replaying her voice in my head. "Seabrook never asks permission. The sea changes its mind every hour." That night, I didn't sleep. And by morning, I wasn't sure if I was waiting for her, or for the part of myself that had started to come alive again when she said my name. The next morning, her light was on again. It was strange how something so simple, a lamp glow through thin curtains, could make the air feel lighter. I saw her outside around 9, crouched by her plants, her fingers brushing the damp soil. She looked up when I passed, and for a moment, she seemed unsure whether to smile. Then she did, a small, tired one, but it reached her eyes. "Morning," I said. "You missed the sunrise," she replied. "It was one of the good ones today." I shrugged. Guess I'll have to wait till tomorrow. You sound sure you'll still be here, she said, teasing, though there was something faintly serious under it. I didn't answer. I just watched as she stood, brushing dirt from her hands. There was a kind of still grace to her, like she moved slower than the rest of the world on purpose. That evening, the sky broke open again, pinks and golds bleeding into the sea. I found myself walking past her house without thinking. The gate was open. She was on the porch, sketchbook in her lap, a cup of tea beside her. "Hi," I said softly. She looked up, squinting against the setting sun. "You walk a lot," she said. "I think better when I move. And what are you thinking about tonight?" I hesitated, half smiling. "Mostly, that the town feels quieter when you stop talking." She laughed, that quiet, warm sound again. "You say things like someone who reads too much. Or maybe just someone who listens too much," I said. Her eyes held mine a moment longer than necessary. Then she nodded toward the spare chair beside her. "Sit, then. Tell me what you hear." She poured tea, not the sweet kind, just plain and earthy. The sound of the waves filled the space between us. "After a while," she said, almost absently, "I used to sit here with my daughter when she was little. We'd count the boats until the sun went down." "Does she visit often?" I asked. "Sometimes." A pause. "She has her own life now. It's what I wanted for her." There was pride in her voice, but something else too. A small ache she didn't bother to hide. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. Some silences aren't meant to be broken. "Instead," I said, "you should draw the sea sometime. It looks different every night." She smiled faintly. "I used to. Before." "Before what?" She didn't say, and I didn't ask. The wind grew colder. She offered me a blanket, and for a second, our fingers brushed. It wasn't deliberate, just an accident, but it was enough to make the air feel charged. She noticed it too. Her hand froze, then pulled back quickly. "Sorry," she said softly. "It's fine. It's complicated," she added after a moment. "Isn't everything?" She looked at me then, really looked, as if weighing something unseen. "You're too young to sound this old." I almost laughed. Maybe age doesn't decide how tired someone can be. She didn't answer, just sipped her tea, eyes distant, the sea reflected in them. When I left that evening, she didn't walk me out. But as I reached the end of her lane, I heard her voice behind me. "Ethan," she called. I turned. She stood by the porch light, one hand resting on the wooden post. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For not asking too many questions." The wind picked up, carrying her voice away before I could respond. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. How she said things like someone trying not to hope, and how every pause between us felt heavier than a sentence. It wasn't attraction in the usual way. It was quieter, older, like finding something familiar in a place you've never been. When I closed my eyes, I could still see her porch light flickering, still hear her voice. Low, steady, a little sad. And for the first time in months, I wished morning would come faster. For a week, the gate stayed closed. No soft humming. No voice calling out across the lane. The house across the shore looked the same, but the life inside it had gone quiet, like a song paused mid-verse. I told myself it didn't matter. That she probably had work, that people disappear for a while, and it means nothing. But every morning, I still looked. 8:47 came and went, and I'd catch myself glancing toward her window, waiting for the faint movement of curtains that never came. The silence made the town louder, the seagulls sharper, the waves colder, my thoughts harder to ignore. 3 days later, I finally saw her. At the grocery store, by the produce section, carefully choosing peaches. She looked different. Hair tied neatly this time. No paint stains on her fingers, no faint smile. Just quiet composure, the kind that felt practiced. "Hey," I said, too softly at first. She didn't hear. When she finally looked up, her expression shifted, recognition, hesitation, and something like regret. "Ethan," she said, polite, distant. "Didn't see you around," I said. "Everything okay?" "Just busy," she replied, the words a little too neat. The small talk that followed felt hollow. Every word skimmed the surface, avoiding the deep water beneath. She excused herself quickly, leaving me with a bag of apples I didn't remember picking. The next few days, I didn't try. I told myself to let her be. But one evening, I found myself walking toward the shore anyway. The tide was low, the sand cold under my shoes. Her house light flickered again, a faint glow behind drawn curtains. I stopped outside her gate, hesitating. The old wooden sign creaked in the wind. Then her voice came from behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I turned. She was standing a few feet away, holding a paintbrush and a small canvas. Her tone wasn't harsh, just tired. "I was just walking," I said too quickly. "Didn't mean to bother you." "You're not bothering me," she said softly, then paused. "It's just people talk here. Small towns always do." I tried to laugh it off. Let them talk. But she didn't smile. "You don't understand. You'll leave one day. They'll stay." Something in her voice cracked on that last word. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just nodded, looking out at the ocean, the reflection of the moon trembling in the water. She set her canvas down beside the fence, crossing her arms against the chill. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she said quietly. "Someone good." She hesitated. "Someone kind." But kindness isn't always enough to save anything. Her eyes lingered on me, steady, searching. I wanted to ask what had hurt her that way, but I couldn't. There was something sacred about the distance she was keeping, like it was the only thing holding her together. So instead, I said, "You don't have to protect me from rumors." Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. "It's not you I'm protecting." She picked up her canvas and turned back toward the porch. Her silhouette looked fragile in the porch light, a figure caught between wanting and restraint. "Good night, Ethan," she said, without looking back. I stood there long after she went inside, watching the sea crawl closer to the rocks. The air smelled of salt and wet wood. In that moment, I realized something. She wasn't avoiding me because she didn't feel something. She was avoiding me because she did. And somehow, that hurt more. That night, I wrote a message I never sent. "I don't want to make your life harder, but it feels strange pretending that silence doesn't mean anything." I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then deleted it. The sea kept roaring outside, as if mocking the quiet between us. It rained for 3 days straight. The kind of rain that made the streets shimmer, that blurred the line between sea and sky until everything felt suspended, still, colorless, waiting. I hadn't seen her since that night by the gate. Every time I passed her house, I told myself not to look, not to care. But the eyes betray what the heart pretends not to feel. By the 4th day, the storm had softened into drizzle. The cafe below my apartment was empty, the air thick with coffee and damp wood. I was halfway through my second cup when I saw her, standing across the street, umbrella in hand, hesitating. She looked smaller somehow, wrapped in a long beige coat, hair damp around her temples. When she finally crossed and stepped inside, she didn't look at me. She just stood at the counter, ordered tea, and turned, only then meeting my eyes. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. For a while, we didn't say anything, just the sound of rain hitting the windows. Her hands were wrapped around the teacup, her eyes on the steam. I could tell she was trying to steady herself, like someone preparing to touch something that had burned them before. "I wasn't avoiding you," she said finally. I didn't reply. She took a slow breath. "It's just easier to stay quiet than to explain things people don't understand." Her voice was low, brittle. "Try me," I said gently. She smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. "You're kind, Ethan. But kindness can turn into cruelty when it promises something it can't keep." "I haven't promised anything," I said. "I just care," she interrupted softly, eyes meeting mine. "You do. I know. That's what scares me." The words landed like pebbles breaking the surface of still water. She looked out the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. "When I was younger, I thought love was supposed to fix things. My husband, he was good, once. We built a life, a daughter, a house that smelled of cinnamon and paint thinner." Her laugh was short and hollow. "Then one mistake. One night I can't take back. And suddenly, the life we built was just ash. He left, took half my heart with him, and the rest of me forgot how to trust anyone again." I wanted to say something, but she kept going. "My daughter still visits, but I see it in her eyes. The disappointment that never fades. The way she looks at me, like she's afraid of turning into me." Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tea. I wanted to reach across the table, to steady them, but I didn't. "Not yet. I'm 40, she said quietly. "And you're, what, 24? 25. She smiled sadly. "That's even worse." I shook my head. "Age doesn't decide what hurts." She finally looked at me, really looked. Her eyes were tired but searching, as if trying to see whether I meant it. "Why are you here?" she asked. "You could be anywhere. With anyone." I took a breath. "Because this, whatever this is, feels real. And I haven't had that in a long time." Her lip quivered, almost imperceptibly. "You shouldn't say things like that." I didn't plan to. For a moment, the air between us felt fragile, stretched thin. She looked down, tracing the rim of her cup with her thumb. Then, in a whisper, almost to herself, she said, "You make me remember what it felt like to be seen." That's the problem. I didn't move, didn't speak. She gathered her coat, her umbrella. "I can't do this," she murmured, standing. "Claire," I said softly. She paused, eyes glistening, 1,000 words trapped behind them. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for making you think this could be anything more than borrowed time." And then she was gone. Just the sound of the bell above the cafe door, the rain swallowing her footsteps. That night, I sat by my window, watching the shore. Her house lights were off again. The reflection of the sea shimmered faintly against her windows, like memories refusing to fade. I should have felt angry. Instead, I just felt still, like my heart had learned to ache quietly. And beneath it all, her voice lingered, low, steady, and breaking. "You make me remember what it felt like to be seen." That's the problem. I left town a week later. Didn't plan it. Didn't even tell her. The cafe owner needed someone to help deliver supplies to a nearby coastal town for a few days. I said yes before thinking, maybe because I needed an excuse to stop looking at her empty window every morning. Maybe because I was tired of wanting something that kept slipping away. The road along the coast stretched endlessly, blue-gray waves on one side, fields of golden grass on the other. For the first time in months, there was no trace of her, no lavender, no soft humming from across the lane, no voice reminding me that silence could be beautiful too. But even away from Seabrook, she stayed. In the way the sea moved. In the way the wind sometimes carried that faint scent of rain. I didn't realize how much of my life had started to orbit her until I was far enough to miss it. Each night, I drafted messages I never sent. "The rain sounds different here. You were right. The sea changes its mind every hour. I keep waiting to forget the color of your porch light." Every time I typed, the words felt heavy, like they were meant for a moment that had already ended. So I stopped writing. Instead, I imagined what she was doing. Maybe cleaning her brushes, maybe brewing tea for one, maybe standing by that same window, pretending not to look toward mine. On the fourth night, I dreamed of her. We were on the beach, barefoot, the tide curling around our ankles. She didn't speak, just smiled, that small, unfinished smile she always tried to hide. But when I reached out, the waves swallowed her silhouette, and I woke up to the sound of rain again. I sat there for hours, watching it fall against the motel window, wondering if somewhere in Seabrook, she was hearing the same rain. When I returned 3 days later, the town felt smaller. The air carried that sharp salt smell that follows a storm. I dropped my bag upstairs, walked to the balcony, and looked across the lane. Her light was on. Something in me, the part that had been holding itself still, finally moved. I crossed the street before I could change my mind. Her gate was half open again, swinging softly in the breeze. The same sound that had once meant welcome now just echoed like a question. I walked to the porch, hesitating before I knocked. No answer. I was about to turn away when I noticed a small envelope tucked behind the flower pot by the door. My name. Inside, her handwriting, small, careful, almost trembling. "Ethan, I'm sorry I left the cafe like that. I've spent years teaching myself how to live quietly. You make that impossible, in a way that terrifies me. You deserve someone who isn't still haunted by who she used to be. Someone whose heart isn't a collection of unfinished paintings." I thought I could just lock that part away again, but every time you smiled, something in me opened. "Please don't wait for me. You're too young to learn stillness this way." See, I read it twice. 3 times. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. That night, I left the envelope on my desk. I didn't reply. I didn't cross the street again. But every morning at 8:47, I still looked. Out of habit, out of hope, out of something I didn't want to name. Her curtains stayed closed. The sea kept moving. The world didn't wait. 2 weeks passed. Seabrook returned to its rhythm. The same seagulls, the same tides, the same faces in the cafe. But something had shifted. The air felt heavier, slower, as if the town itself remembered her absence. I tried to forget her. I threw myself into work, took longer walks, stayed out until dark. But forgetting isn't the opposite of remembering. It's the quieter form of holding on. Every time I passed her lane, my steps faltered. Her house looked the same, but the silence felt deeper now. The kind of silence that hums like grief. One night, the rain came back, soft at first, then steady. I couldn't stay still. Something inside me kept saying go. I crossed the lane before my mind could argue. Her porch light was off, but there was a faint glow from inside. Candlelight, flickering through the half-drawn curtains. When I knocked, there was no answer. I almost turned back. Then the door opened slightly. She stood there in a gray sweater, barefoot, her hair loose. No surprise in her eyes, just the calm of someone who'd been waiting for a storm to arrive. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know." "Then why are you?" I hesitated, rain dripping from my jacket. "Because not being here feels worse." Her lips parted, maybe to argue, maybe to tell me to leave, but nothing came out. She just stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled like paint and chamomile. A half-finished canvas rested against the wall, brush strokes trailing into nothing. She poured tea wordlessly. The rain tapped softly against the windows, and in that small sound, everything we hadn't said lived. "I got your letter," I said. She didn't look up. "I hoped you'd throw it away." "I didn't." "I know." She finally met my eyes. There was sadness there, but also something else. Relief, maybe. "You shouldn't keep chasing broken things," she whispered. "Then stop being one," I said quietly. She froze, teacup in hand. The words had slipped out before I could stop them, but I didn't take them back. She set the cup down slowly, the porcelain clinking softly. "You think it's that easy?" "No," I said. "I just think you've punished yourself long enough." Her eyes shimmered, not with anger, with exhaustion. "You don't understand what it's like to hurt people who didn't deserve it. To carry that weight into every room you walk into." "Maybe not," I said. "But I understand what it's like to meet someone who makes the noise stop, and then watch them push it all away." Her breath caught. The candlelight flickered between us, stretching shadows across the walls. "You make it sound like I'm something worth staying for," she said softly. I stepped closer. "You are." The space between us felt electric, fragile. She looked up at me, not with surprise, but with the kind of acceptance that comes when there's nothing left to hide. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Ethan, if I let this happen, I'll ruin it. I always ruin it." I shook my head. "Not everything you touch breaks." For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Her eyes searched mine, trembling with the question she was too afraid to ask. Then she reached out, not to hold me, not yet, but to brush her fingers against my sleeve, like testing if the moment was real. "I don't know how to do this," she breathed. "Neither do I said. "But I want to try." She looked away, biting her lip, her voice shaking. "And what happens when this ends?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Because the truth would only hurt more. We stood there in silence, the rain whispering against the roof, her hand still resting on my arm, halfway between resistance and surrender. The candle flickered, went out. In the dim glow of the streetlight outside, I saw her close her eyes. The distance between us dissolved. And just as I leaned in, not for a kiss, but for the truth, she whispered, "Don't make me choose." The words hung in the dark, trembling, fragile. And then she stepped back. The rain kept falling, the moment suspended, one breath away from something irreversible. Neither of us spoke. But in the quiet, I knew. Some love doesn't need a beginning or an end. It just needs to be real. For a little while it's been 6 months since that night. Since the candle went out, and she whispered, "Don't make me choose." The days after felt hollow, like walking through fog. I didn't see her for weeks. I'd catch glimpses. Her silhouette by the window, her car parked at the pier, but she kept her distance. And I didn't chase her. Not because I stopped caring. Because I finally understood what she needed. Space to forgive herself. Time softened the ache. The town kept moving. Summer rolled in, tourists, salt on the air, laughter spilling from the boardwalk cafe. I still went for my morning walks by the shore, same time, 8:47 a.m. The waves still folded over themselves. The sun still rose where it always did. One morning, I saw her there again, standing near the railing, holding her thermos of tea, watching the horizon like she was waiting for something she didn't expect to come. When she turned and saw me, her smile was small, hesitant, unsure, but it was real. That was enough. We fell into an easy rhythm after that. Not lovers, not strangers, something in between. She'd wave from her porch when I walked past. Sometimes I'd stop. We'd talk about the weather, her garden, a book she was reading. No big gestures, no declarations, just quiet moments that said more than words ever could. Her laughter came back slowly, softer but truer, like she'd forgotten how it sounded until then. And every time she laughed, I felt something inside me settle, like I'd been holding my breath for months. One afternoon, I found her at the old bench by the pier, the same one we'd sat on that first week when all this began. She'd brought 2 cups of tea, black for me, mint for her. "You still remember?" I asked, sitting beside her. She smiled. "Some things you don't forget." The sea stretched wide and endless before us. Gulls dipped low over the waves. The sun was warm, but not harsh, the kind of light that feels like forgiveness. "After a while," she said, "I thought I'd ruined everything, that I didn't deserve another chance to feel this." I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. "You didn't ruin anything. You just stopped believing you could start again." She breathed out, long and quiet. "And you?" "Still waiting." I smiled faintly. "I stopped waiting. I just stayed." Her hand brushed mine on the bench. Accidental, maybe. Or maybe not. Neither of us moved. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, familiar, like a shared secret. A few weeks later, I saw her repainting the shutters on her porch, a light blue this time, the color of early morning. She waved when she saw me. "You're finally changing things," I said. She laughed. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just ready to stop hiding behind old colors." It was such a small thing, paint on wood, but it felt like watching her breathe again. And I realized something then. Love doesn't always end with confessions or goodbyes. Sometimes it just finds its place quietly, inside routine, inside peace. The last time we sat together, late evening, near her garden, she poured tea into 2 mugs, and we watched the sun sink behind the water. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked softly. "All the time." She nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Me too. But I don't regret stepping back." "I know," I said. "If you hadn't, maybe we wouldn't be here now." She looked at me then, really looked, and smiled the kind of smile that says everything without speaking. No promises, no endings, just a quiet knowing that what we had, whatever it was, would always stay with us. Now, every morning at 8:47 a.m., I still see her by the shore. Sometimes she's painting. Sometimes she's just standing there, tea in hand. And when our eyes meet, there's no ache anymore. Just warmth. Something small, something earned. Love, I've learned, doesn't always have to burn to be real. Sometimes it's enough that it lingers, gently, endlessly, like the tide returning home.